Welcome back to the channel. Glad you could join me. I wanted to talk about a book that I read back in high school. So, let's see, 20 plus years ago. Yeah, anyway, I think I'm coming up on my 25th high school reunion. Not entirely sure. I'd have to check. Anyway, The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. A lot of stuff that I read for my English classes in high school, I absolutely detested. This was one of the ones that I really enjoyed. Now, if you are squeamish at all, then you probably don't want to read this book. It is pretty disturbing. So, let's get into the story. Gregor Samsa, he's a German man living in Germany, obviously. Franz Kafka wrote this originally in his native language of German, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the original German title. Not going to happen. But he is a salesman, traveling salesman. He lives with his parents and his younger sister, and he is the sole breadwinner for the family. His dad has lost his business, and I don't remember the whole circumstances around that, but he has debts, and he's seen, at least at the beginning of the story, his father is seen as being incapable of going back to work. And because of that, Gregor has had to step up and be the sole breadwinner for the family. Well, he wakes up one morning and he has been transformed into a monstrous vermin. That's the wording, is a monstrous vermin. It is depicted more modernly that he's been transformed into a giant cockroach. That's kind of the main interpretation nowadays, is that Gregor Samsa is this giant cockroach, and that's why I say, if you're squeamish, do not read this, because it can be very, very, very disturbing. Anyway, Gregor's family finds out about this that first day. His boss basically shows up and is like, "Why isn't Gregor at work?" And they go to his room. They can't really tell what's going on beyond the door. He had fallen asleep on his back, and as you know, sometimes certain beetles and things, they have a hard time flipping over onto their stomach. So he was on his bed, on his back. He's struggling to get up. He can't. He finally gets up, and his boss freaks out because he's come face to face with this giant cockroach. I mean, what can you say? It's a giant cockroach. He retreats into his room because he's, at that point, immediately met with hostility. His father freaks out too, chases him back into his room, and actually injures him trying to close the door to his room. But because Gregor can't now physically go back to work, the rest of the family has to step up, because what are they going to do? There's no more money coming in. Their son cannot go to work, and basically they have to hide him in his room. I mean, can you imagine what would happen if you woke up one day and a member of your family had turned into a giant cockroach? Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that they didn't immediately go in and kill this giant cockroach. That they recognized that somehow their son and brother was this huge bug now living in his room. I think that nowadays we might just assume that the giant bug had devoured or whatever else, but because of what's going on, they end up basically shunning Gregor. He's now locked in his room for the most part, with very little help and very little affection now, almost no affection whatsoever, being given from the family to Gregor. So the father actually returns to work, and previously it kind of been implied that, or at least in Gregor's mind, that his father couldn't return to work, that he was in some way incapable of going back to work. And Gregor's sister, Greta, also goes to work, and she ends up as a sales girl. Anyway, I very, very much enjoyed this book. It's dark, and it has been seen and interpreted in various ways by various people. I was looking at some stuff earlier, and let's see, the religious or psychological interpretation, the relationship between Gregor and his father is seen as apparently Franz Kafka had a similar relationship, kind of antagonistic maybe, between him and his father, and people have said that maybe that's why Gregor and his father have the relationship that they do in the book. Vladimir Nabokov, who wrote the famous, very famous story Lolita, he apparently rejected this and came out with a different interpretation. Apparently, there's a feminist interpretation of this as well, focusing mostly on Franz Kafka, mostly on Gregor's sister Greta. So there's a lot of different things going on. I remember talking in my English class about the novel here, and my English teacher mentioning to us that one of the possible interpretations of this is an allegory between the German people and the German government at the time. Let's see, when was this written? This was written in 1915, so around the time of World War I. I'm not entirely up on my politics from that particular time in history. I know that that part of what was kind of taught to me at that point in time was that there was a kind of it was kind of seen as like Gregor's father was the German government and Gregor was the German people, and so the German government was relying too much on the German people and not doing as much. But hey, I don't know. But this story has a lot in it that is allegorical in nature. I mean, as a story of a man who wakes up and finds himself to be a giant bug, there's a lot that you can bring into as an interpretation of the situation. You have to kind of, in my mind, like I said, I did enjoy this story. It's a very dark story. It's very. I mean, Gregor starts to find out about himself as he's in the body of this giant bug. And I don't mean that in the sense of like self-discovery. I mean, he starts finding out that he can like climb on walls like a bug can. It's kind of one of those things where he's like, well, bugs can do it, maybe so can I. And he starts climbing the walls and the ceiling, and it really disturbs his family that they go into the room and they're never sure where Gregor is going to be, because he could be on the ceiling, he could be on the wall. And he actually starts adopting some of the characteristics of the bug that he is. And that's one of the reasons why they modern depictions of the Metamorphosis depict Gregor as a cockroach, because he finds that he likes to hide in dark places. And so when people come into his room, he'll scuttle under a couch that they have in the room, because that's where he feels most comfortable. He also finds that the food that he likes, so his family, at least initially, it's okay. They're like, we need to show Gregor that we still care for him, and they bring him food, which slowly metamorphoses as well into a hate and a disgust for having to care for this giant bug. And so there's, again, Metamorphosis, it's a good title for this because there's a lot of metamorphoses that occur in the characters, in the situation. But anyway, Gregor finds that he prefers his food to be rotted in this form. And so he starts, like I said, he starts adopting some of these characteristics of the shape that he's now locked into. And so even then you can kind of draw into this the nature versus nurture argument of whether it's the environment that you are in, or it is the I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but it's environment versus the care and socialization that you receive. So you could even pull that argument into an interpretation of this particular novel. So once again, I very much enjoyed the Metamorphosis. I can't say that I really look forward to, say, reading it again. It is, as I said, it is disturbing, and it is very dark. And I am not going into all of the dark things that happen to Gregor now that he's in the form of an insect, but it gets worse. So it's kind of hard to say, that the worst thing that happens to Gregor in this particular novel is that he turns into a giant bug. Yeah, it gets worse for Gregor. So, like I said, it's not very long. It's 70 pages, so it's very, very much a short story. Apparently, it's one of the longest stories, or it is the longest of the stories Kafka considered complete and published during his lifetime. That's a quote from Wikipedia, apparently. But so this is the longest story he wrote that he considered complete, and it was published during his lifetime. And if I remember right, Kafka himself was very much like like Edgar Allan Poe in some ways. He was 40 when he died, so he wasn't that old. He's actually younger than I am now. And he died of laryngeal tuberculosis. But as I recall, he had some mental issues and was kind of a dark, depressed kind of person when he was alive. And this this, in my opinion, it definitely informed his writing and made it darker and everything. Apparently, he suffered from a delusion, if you will, that people found him repulsive. So that may also have been an inspiration for writing the Metamorphosis. So if you're interested in something dark that's well written and interesting, please pick up the Metamorphosis. If you're not, skip the Metamorphosis. It is disturbing. Anyway, that being said, let me know what you thought about the Metamorphosis. If you have read it, let me know if this is maybe up your alley. If you're thinking, oh wow, this sounds like something that I would love to read, please let me know. Thoughts and comments, as always, down below. Like and subscribe, and enjoy what you're reading.